The purpose of this sixth audio is to at last focus on the specific question which we began this series with, which is, what exactly is the mission of Catholic higher education? Up to this point, we've covered quite a bit of ground. We've gone over, in general, the broadened understanding of its mission, which the Catholic Church recognized at the Second Vatican Council. And we've gone over a summary of the 6 decades of experience of Catholic colleges and universities in the United States, seeking to implement the vision of the Council and dealing with the numerous changes and challenges that have occurred across Catholic higher ed. The fact that I'm recording this audio in 2023 to clarify the mission of Catholic higher education points to the greatest of these challenges, which I alluded to in the last audio. And that is that in varying degrees across the 200 plus Catholic higher ed institutions in the United States, the crisis of Catholic identity still exists. Meaning that in many places there is still a fuzziness and lack of clarity and a lack of a shared understanding from boards of trustees down to faculty and staff about what exactly the Catholic dimension of the university's work is. Though leaders in Catholic higher education, working with the Vatican, essentially clarified the fundamental components of the Catholic mission by the late 70s and 80s, in many different institutions, to many different degrees, that clarification did not quite trickle down, or sink deep roots, or persist enough in the culture to really gain a clear foothold on the imaginations of trustees and administrators and faculty. The vision of the mission of Catholic higher education, in other words, has not been fully received or known and put into practice sufficiently in many different institutions. And this is certainly not necessarily because of ill will towards the Catholic faith on the part of institutional leaders or others. It's likely the result of a host of other factors, including changes in personnel and leadership over time, the complexities of running colleges and universities, the realities of shared governance and academic freedom, but perhaps most of all, just insufficient education and training for presidents and trustees, faculty and staff in what the Church has come to understand its mission in higher education to be. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, which I described in the last audio, are institutions which are not experiencing this identity crisis. They have more fully received the vision of Catholic higher ed that university and church leaders adopted. And with that vision in hand, their focus has been more on action and putting that vision into practice in many new and creative ways. Conscious of the fact that if efforts are not made, it's almost inevitable that the mission is marginalized or lost or just simply not given the attention that it truly deserves. So the purpose of this audio and the next is to clarify now what that vision is. And as I mentioned in the last audio, this is really a consensus vision of leaders of Catholic higher ed around the world, working with bishops and with the Vatican. Though there was some tension and struggle over the issue of who would have ultimate accountability of Catholic universities maintaining their Catholic character, that issue is both separate from the fundamental vision that was agreed upon and no longer a matter that is taking up the time and attention and energy either of bishops or of university leaders. In other words, it's come to be understood that Catholic universities, simply by being Catholic, have a necessary relationship with the wider Catholic Church and with the hierarchy, the bishops, and the Vatican. That matter was settled in the second part of Ex Corde Ecclesia, and it's been settled in the culture of cooperation and trust and communication and partnership that has emerged between bishops and university presidents on the whole. So relationship between universities and the larger church is now part of the presumed vision of Catholic higher ed and its mission today. and so I'll be making reference to it further in the next audio. Having mentioned John Paul II's Apostolic Constitution, Ex Corde Ecclesia, already, let me just say that the heart of the vision that I'm referring to is expressed in this document, which, as an apostolic constitution, has a certain level of authority in the life of the Church. No institution of higher education that calls itself Catholic can afford to ignore it. And the second part of Ex Corde, which includes a series of binding norms or rules for Catholic universities to follow, including requirements in various areas of university life and operations. These form part of how the Church governs itself and the Church's legal structure, and these too cannot be ignored by Catholic universities. And this is the whole area of canon law, the laws that Catholic universities are obliged to follow, just as they are obliged to follow civil laws. All this is to say that the vision of the core elements of mission, which I'm going to describe, have the highest backing of the Church's authority structures. However, as I described in the last audio going over the history, it's essential that we see the substance of this vision as coming from the wider or more dispersed authority of Catholic university leaders. What is contained in Ex Corde Ecclesia is essentially the vision that was worked out by university leaders with Vatican officials and bishops from the late 60s through the 70s. And John Paul II essentially ratified that vision and sought to support its implementation by canon law. It's a consensus vision, though. And to help point that out, what I'd like to do is not simply discuss the contents of Ex Corde Ecclesia, but to touch on its major themes, and to do it by referring to a number of other documents that university leaders, along with bishops and Vatican officials, issued on the way to Ex Corde Ecclesia's promulgation in 1990. Ex Corde Ecclesia, in other words, stands as a kind of summary document of conversations that had been taking place in the Church in the 25 years from the end of the Second Vatican Council in 1965 to 1990. So I'll be making reference to documents written from the 1960s through the 70s and 80s of leaders in global Catholic and U.S. Catholic higher education and of the U.S. bishops. And I will also be making reference to a number of statements and developments that followed the publication of Ex Corde. And this includes revisions to the Code of Canon Law, statements of Popes John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and Francis, and statements of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And just by looking at the wide sweep of these documents and seeing again and again the same points and same themes coming up is how we know that this really is a consensus vision. It's a vision that has consistency and stability over time, at this point nearly 6 decades. This, as well as its bottom-up nature in many respects, gives it added authority. While it's certainly a vision that could be implemented in a wide variety of ways, it's important to note that it doesn't have any real rival within the Church's thinking about higher ed. I mention this because some who work in Catholic institutions who may be suspicious of or alienated from organized religion or the Catholic Church, often for very good reasons, may, as a result of legitimate grievances, want to just sweep aside what the Church teaches about higher education, perhaps with the thought that whatever's in Ex Corde Ecclesia, we don't have to consider much. That's only for the most conservative institutions to think or care about. And when this kind of outlook has been matched by perhaps several decades of not forming staff or employees or administrators and trustees in this vision, then the culture of a particular institution may just reinforce the view that we've always done it our way, apart from the institutional church. And since we haven't needed to reflect much on what the Church has taught on this topic for all this time, there's perhaps no need to do it now. So here I'm referring again to one end of the spectrum of responses to the changes in Catholic higher ed from the 60s onward. In response to that perspective, it's important to say that the consensus vision expressed in Ex Corde is the product of reflection of university leaders drawn from all across the Catholic world. And in the United States, it's the vision embraced by U.S. Catholic leaders of higher ed, going back as far as the Land O'Lakes Statement in 1967, as a vision endorsed across the board by leaders of U.S. Catholic higher ed institutions. It was hardly the product of only a very small conservative few. In fact, it is a vision that predates the distinction made today between the few highly conservative Catholic universities and the rest. It is a centrist consensus vision, and in the United States, where 90% or more of all Catholic higher ed institutions are founded by religious orders, it's a vision that expresses what the leaders of those religious order-founded institutions believed makes up a Catholic college or university, as opposed to something just imposed by the Pope or the bishops. So, while an outlook of skepticism, often for very legitimate reasons, may give an institution or members of an institution pause to consider what the wider Catholic higher ed community has endorsed, and while each Catholic institution will always want to be true to its own charism and traditions, nevertheless, this is the vision that has been the explicitly Catholic vision of higher education for the last 60 years. There is no other vision or consensus, and this is what the global Catholic Church has agreed is the project in higher education moving forward. So learning it, studying it, discovering it, or even rediscovering it is an essential and necessary task for every institution that wants to genuinely continue to call itself Catholic, understanding that that word, Catholic, means being part of the global body of Catholics and Catholic institutions worldwide. It means being part of that family. And so family resemblances matter enormously, all traceable to the common calling of following Jesus and continuing his one mission. So let's now start to look at different components of this mission. Like with my description in the second audio of the overall mission of the Catholic Church, the mission of Catholic colleges and universities has many different aspects. It's multifaceted, yet it's also a unified mission, a single mission, a coherent whole, or in the words of Pope John Paul II, it's a single but complex reality. And you'll recall that the meaning of that phrase is that though it has many parts, all those parts are necessary and essential. It's not possible to speak of the mission in its integrity while leaving out certain elements or parts. All the parts need to be included. A couple images to help us think of this are, first of all, the image of a braided cord with many different strands that are woven together and that collectively comprise the distinctiveness and strength of a Catholic institution. Or perhaps another image to capture the different dimensions of the mission is the different organ systems of the human body. So, for example, we have a respiratory system, an endocrine system, a skeletal and digestive and muscular and urinary and reproductive system. And yet for us to function and live well as humans, we need all of these intact. When any one of these is diseased or breaking down, we experience major problems. So I think this is a helpful way for us to think about the different parts of this vision that has been passed along for the last several decades. It's a vision that touches on every aspect of university life, and while it's complex, it's also a single whole that requires the integrity of the whole to be maintained. So let me begin now by describing a first dimension of a Catholic university's mission, a first strand in the cord, or a first life system that distinguishes the religious character of Catholic universities. And this has to do with the nature of the community itself that the university or the campus environment is. Reflection on the campus environment often doesn't get first billing in descriptions of Catholic higher education. Usually academics do, but I think it's important to start here because the mission truly does belong to everyone, and every member of the community contributes to the character of the community, whether they're faculty, staff, administrators, trustees, or students, or alumni. And if in some institutions discussion of the mission has been sometimes too unclear or fuzzy or maybe even mystifying, I hope starting here is a way of immediately pointing to some crucial values that everyone at the university can embrace and understand that this is what it means to work at a Catholic institution. According to Vatican II's Declaration on Christian Education, Gravissimum Educationis, every Catholic school community aspires to create a special atmosphere animated by the gospel spirit of freedom and charity to help youth grow. Shortly after Vatican II, as Catholic higher ed leaders reflected more on the distinctive nature of their institutions, they formulated as the first of their 4 essential characteristics of Catholic institutions that they are marked by a Christian inspiration, not only of individuals, but of the university community as such. And they will expand on that to say that Catholic ideals, attitudes, and principles penetrate and inform university activities, that they are institutions in which Catholicism is vitally present and operative. John Paul II repeated all of these phrases in Ex Corde Ecclesia and developed especially a number of reflections of these leaders on the kind of values that inspired these communities. They are to be communities characterized by mutual respect, sincere dialogue, and the protection of the rights of individuals. Each member of the community is to be assisted to achieve wholeness as human persons. In turn, the unity of the community is to be promoted by all. The source of this unity springs from a common dedication to truth, a common vision of the dignity of the human person, of everyone in the community, and ultimately an institutional commitment to the person and message of Christ. This last phrase does not refer to an assumption that everyone in the community is Catholic or Christian or religious. There's an understanding of the religiously diverse settings of Catholic higher ed institutions. Rather, Christian convictions and inspiration and identity have a central place and a home. So the community culture is one that includes all of these fundamental human values I just mentioned, such as freedom, charity, the ability of each individual to shape the life of the community, and respect for the dignity and uniqueness of each individual. But the culture also and simultaneously is one that is publicly religious and affirmative of Christianity and the Catholic tradition in particular. Catholic leaders at Land O'Lakes in 1967 put it this way: the Catholic University is a society of students and faculty in which the consequences of Christian truth are taken seriously in person-to-person relationships, where the importance of religious commitment is accepted and constantly witnessed to, and where the students can learn by personal experience to consecrate their talent and learning to worthy social purposes. All of this will display itself on the Catholic campus as a distinctive style of living. The authors of that document then go on to say that the social organization should be such as to emphasize the university's concern for persons as individuals and for appropriate participation by all members of the community of learners in university decisions. Administrative actions, too, should be appropriately guided by Christian ideas and ideals, and should eminently display the respect and concern for persons. So what's held up here is the ideal of a real community, where all members are supported and affirmed, and there is a universal spirit of charity and love animating it. And yet, crucially, it is not a secular community in which unity is attained, at least in part, by putting aside or suppressing religious differences. Rather, there is an openness to express and live out the Christian faith of the university in support of its Christian members, and a willingness to have members of other religions express their faith as well. And this expresses the Catholic Church's commitment at Vatican II to ecumenism and to interreligious dialogue, to cooperation and mutual understanding of members of other Christian churches and members of other religions. And of course, this openness extends also to those without a religious perspective. The community of a Catholic university is to be a place in which the religious freedom and conscience and best understanding of each person as to the ultimate meaning of life is defended and protected, and yet also supported enough to be made part of public discussions and a shared pursuit of truth in the kind of centered pluralism I described in the third audio in this series. This being the Catholic-sponsored creation of a cultural village square in which all viewpoints, religious and non-religious, can come together in an open discussion and exchange on the deepest questions and issues that affect human beings. One in which the full identities of people, religious and non-religious, can be openly expressed and celebrated. Here's how the 1972 document, The Catholic University in the Modern World, puts all this together. A university community with a Catholic atmosphere offers its students a milieu conducive to their integral development. In such a community, they will find respect for intellectual life, for scholarly research, and also for religious values. They will experience a community that is open and receptive to truth from any quarter, a community which attempts to integrate all human knowledge into a vision of the world whose lines are drawn by faith as well as by reason. And they go on to say, Catholic universities can do much to promote Christian ecumenism and an ongoing dialogue with those of other religions and with non-believers, both by preparing persons qualified to participate in serious interfaith discussions and by providing an atmosphere favorable to their success. Frank and open dialogue will do much to eliminate misunderstandings, highlight ideas and values that are held in common, and bring into sharper focus the meaning and impact of the Christian message for mankind. So if this description of the Catholic University or its community ideals strikes you as complex, that's what made me think of the analogy to an organ system. And in all this interesting complexity, Catholic universities really are affirming a whole bunch of things all at once. Care and friendship and respect and compassion for each individual, yet also openness about the affirmations of the Catholic religious tradition and a commitment to live that faith publicly and to share it with others in support of Catholics who come to study and work at these places, and also in support of other Christians and members of other religious traditions, encouraging them to be open about their faith perspectives and to engage in conversations about commonalities and differences. The 1972 document, The Catholic University in the Modern World, puts it this way, that the experience of living in close association with people of different social, ethnic, and religious backgrounds, and sometimes of different nationalities, will give students a unique opportunity to learn to exercise responsibility in dealing with others and to overcome any prejudices they may have. The community as such can be marked then by a spirit of universality. Catholics can participate and cooperate with those of other churches or religions, sharing ideas and values from many different traditions. Not in a spirit of shallow eclecticism, but in an effort to see the whole of reality in the light of the truth which Christ came to reveal to humans. So the affirmation of the Catholic faith as a mark of the community opens out to deep respect for the consciences and religious beliefs or non-religious beliefs of others, and an invitation to engage with all people, to learn from them in a spirit of discovery and love of truth. One is reminded again of the insight of the Second Vatican Council that the Catholic Church had, affirming that God speaks in cultures at large and in other religions, and there are things which Catholics need to learn from other Christians and those of other faiths and of no faith, and vice versa. This openness to others and to learning is part of the university's commitment to cultivate the Catholic and Christian faith of those members of its community which are Catholic and Christian. Because essential to the Catholic tradition is this attitude of universality and openness, and since Vatican II, this positive ecumenical and interreligious sensitivity. So there is always this basic and fundamental commitment that Catholic universities be places where the Christian faith is known and discussed and explored, and where it is possible for students to acquire, or if they have already done so, to deepen a Christian way of life. To return to Ex Corde Ecclesia, one of the statements John Paul II makes is that Christians among the teachers are called to be witnesses and educators of authentic Christian life, and that all teachers, Christian or not, are to be inspired not only by academic ideals, but by the principles of an authentic human life, nurturing in students the search for truth and for meaning throughout their lives, and to cultivate in students an ability to wonder, to understand, to contemplate, to make personal judgments, and to develop a religious, moral, and social sense. Now, considering again the diversity of the workforce at Catholic universities, and the fact that not all may be religious or comfortable promoting every one of these values, I think it's simple enough to translate this into understanding that not just teachers, but all those who work at a Catholic university can contribute in whichever of these ways is most appropriate for them given their personal gifts and inclinations. One doesn't have to do everything to contribute to the community and to do a lot. The Catholic Church envisions not homogeneous communities in higher education, but interestingly diverse ones, with the diversity itself lovingly hosted by a strong and self-assured Catholic identity that, as part of its identity, is open to all and wants to learn from all, as much as witness to all to what it has to offer the world. Understanding all of this in the context of the Catholic Church's commitment to religious freedom and to ecumenism and interreligious relationships, I think we can see that there is an emphasis both on unity and inclusion and acceptance of diversity, but also a forthrightness and openness about the Catholic University being committed to inclusion out of an expression of its commitment to the Christian vision of God's love for all and God's desire to be known for the sake of bringing greater peace and justice in healing and wholeness to the entire human race. And this both and perspective, both avowedly Catholic and open to a diverse human community, is woven through Catholic thinking on higher education. And it stems from Catholic universities being both universities and Catholic, participants both in the life of the Catholic Church and in the higher ed community. Again, as the Vatican II Declaration on Christian Education put it, the purpose of a Catholic university is that the Christian mind may achieve, as it were, a public, persistent, and universal presence in the whole enterprise of advancing higher culture, and that the students of these institutions become people outstanding in learning, ready to shoulder society's heavy burdens, and to witness the faith to the world. So, to step back from these comments on the kind of community that a Catholic university aspires to be and to create, it's very much a picture of community defined by the vision of the Second Vatican Council, in which the Church sees itself open and outwardly facing the entire rest of the world, not isolated as it had been in a kind of ghetto of Catholics speaking to only Catholics. But pulling off this kind of community seems to take actually a stronger kind of Catholic identity than the older form, in which everyone around you pretty much believes the same thing. And in the face of the real erosion of Catholic identity that followed this opening of the doors and windows to the modern world and to diverse religious and non-religious influences in the 60s and then in the 70s, and in many cases after that as well, Catholic leaders in higher education began to insist even more strongly on the importance of keeping the faith dimension of the Catholic university community alive and vital. So Pope John Paul II, in an address in 1979, states that to be what it ought to be, a Catholic college or university must set up among its faculty and students a real community which bears witness to a living and operative Christianity, a community where sincere commitment to scientific research and study goes together with a deep commitment to authentic Christian living. Following up on this statement, the U.S. bishops in 1981 state that our concern then is that students and faculty find on our campuses the community of faith which can encourage and support them. Unless a Catholic institution of higher learning fosters such a faith community, it contradicts its own mission. 20 years later, in the U.S. application of Ex Corde Ecclesia, the U.S. bishops will repeat themselves in noting that one of the essential elements of the Catholic identity of the university is the commitment to create a campus culture and environment that is expressive and supportive of a Catholic way of life. Popes Benedict XVI and Francis repeat this. Benedict states in an address to Catholic educators in the United States in 2008 that every Catholic educational institution is to be a place to encounter the living God who in Jesus Christ reveals his transforming love and truth. And certainly he makes this statement with no illusions as to the diverse nature of Catholic institutions. Pope Francis makes this explicit in a 2014 address to the Congregation for Catholic Education. He states that, in fact, Catholic schools and universities are attended by many non-Christian students as well as non-believers. Catholic educational institutions offer everyone an education aimed at the integral development of the person that responds to the right of all people to have access to knowledge and understanding. But they are equally called to offer to all the Christian message, respecting fully the freedom of all. So to sum up, I think what we see here is an effort of leaders in the Catholic world really insisting that Catholic universities must not go down the road that the Protestant universities did in the middle part of the 20th century, where there was a failure of nerve and theological conviction to express the particular theological convictions of those Protestant institutions, Baptist and Quaker and Anglican and Calvinist and Methodist and Presbyterian. Open expression of Catholic theological convictions and affirmations must remain central to the culture and the community that Catholic universities aspire to be. Absolutely, Catholic universities will recognize the dignity of every person and respect the religious liberty of every individual. And they will continue to promote the unity of all Christians and dialogue and understanding between Catholics and members of other religious communities and non-believing people. But they will also ask that all those who are part of the community recognize and respect the Catholic nature of the institution and its efforts to foster a real community of faith for students of faith. In sum here, let me read in full Pope John Paul II's statement on the university community in Ex Corde Ecclesia. And we see here, again, the yin and the yang together of Catholic identity and openness to diversity, combining in a true and genuine unity of different people. A Catholic university pursues its objectives through its formation of an authentic human community animated by the Spirit of Christ. The source of its unity springs from a common dedication to truth, a common vision of the dignity of the human person, and ultimately the person and message of Christ, which gives the institution its distinctive character. As a result of this inspiration, the community is animated by a spirit of freedom and charity. It is characterized by mutual respect, sincere dialogue, and protection of the rights of individuals. It assists each of its members to achieve wholeness as human persons. In turn, everyone in the community helps in promoting unity, and each one, according to his or her role and capacity, contributes towards decisions which affect the community, and also towards maintaining and strengthening the distinctive Catholic character of the institution. So what I've described so far as a first strand of a Catholic university's mission is a number of goals for the community life of the institution. These goals describe what the Catholic University aims to be and the kinds of activities that it wants to encourage. Religious and interreligious dialogue and exchange, all surrounded and informed by truly human values of care and mutual respect and high regard for the dignity of every member of the community. To live this way and be this kind of community is one of the most important aspects of what Catholic universities are aiming to achieve. But alongside the what is the how and the who. How this kind of community will be cultivated and supported, and who will have responsibility for doing this. So I'd like now to shift to describing a second strand in the braided cord of Catholic University mission, or a second set of procedures and structures and important activities for a Catholic institution to maintain in order to carry out its mission of being this type of community. And this embraces a number of interrelated topics, including hiring and personnel, campus ministry, and student affairs, among others. To switch to my other human body analogy, there are a number of interrelated organs that need to be in place and functioning together healthily for the community I just described to be a reality. The Catholic and inclusive Christian community life system requires a distinct and undergirding community life support system of its own in order to exist. So part of the mission of a Catholic college or university is to also be this community life support system, to be it and to provide it. As before, what I'll do now is just walk through a number of repeated statements that are made throughout the reflection of Catholic leaders in higher education over the last 50 years on this topic. Ex Corde Ecclesia, again, has the highest authority of all these statements, but there is very little in it that isn't an echo of other voices in other documents. So first, a few words about hiring and personnel. There is a very clear recognition that in order for the Catholic life and the Catholic dimension of the institution to thrive, it's necessary to have individuals who are spiritually committed to either the Catholic faith or to Christianity and the mission of the university more broadly understood. Some of the oldest statements in the years following the Second Vatican Council emphasized especially the presence of scholars, faculty, who are personally rooted in the Catholic tradition. In 1972, one sees a statement to this effect by the U.S. bishops in a document entitled "To Teach as Jesus Did." And in the same year, the more global statement of Catholic university leaders, the Catholic University in the Modern World, notes that in a spirit of dialogue rooted in mutual respect and understanding, Catholic teachers can share with students their own faith and values. And 20 years later, this same sentiment is echoed by John Paul II when he notes in Ex Corde that Christians among the teachers are called to be witnesses and educators of authentic Christian life, which evidences attained integration between faith and life and between professional competence and Christian wisdom. Now, these statements can indicate a wide variety of activities, from faculty participating with students in liturgy, to informal conversations, to structured conversations, and just the witness of personal integrity. One should, I think, interpret this hope broadly, that Catholic universities be a place where personally committed Catholics are employed and available, and open in different kinds of ways to supporting the institution's hope to have the university be a community of faith. Certainly this hope also extends to staff and administrators and all those connected with the institution. Now, I've only just begun to describe the many strands in the cord of Catholic university mission. I have yet, for example, to touch on academics or service to the community. But whatever the specific activity, it's the personnel, the people, the who of mission that really matters for any of these marking the institution. And so in the legal or juridical part of both Ex Corde Ecclesia in 1990 and the U.S. Bishop's U.S. application of Ex Corde Ecclesia in the year 2000, one sees stated the principle that the responsibility for safeguarding and strengthening the Catholic identity of the university, though entrusted principally to the university authorities, to the president and the board of trustees, is shared in varying degrees by all members of the university community, and therefore that calls for the recruitment of adequate personnel, especially teachers and administrators who are both willing and able to promote the Catholic identity. And this would include very much both Catholics and non-Catholics. The U.S. application of Ex Corde states that men and women of religious faiths other than Catholic on the board of trustees, on the faculty, and in other positions can make a valuable contribution to the university, and their presence affords the opportunity for all to learn and benefit from each other. The university should welcome them as full partners in the campus community. And what's key is that all new members of the community be informed about the Catholic identity of the institution and its implications, and about their responsibility to promote or at least respect that identity at the time of their appointment. So that would include teachers and administrators, and each member of the board, too, needs to be committed to the practical implications of the university's Catholic identity. In a few of the norms stated in both Ex Corde and the U.S. Bishop's application of Ex Corde, there is a belief that having enough personally committed Catholics, either on the faculty or the board, is an important key to serving the mission. So, for example, Ex Corde states that the number of non-Catholic teachers should not be allowed to constitute a majority within the institution. Similarly, the U.S. application states that to the extent possible, the majority of the board should be Catholics committed to the Church, and that the president should be Catholic. One understands the intentions here, but the fact is that self-identifying Catholics do not always support all aspects of the university mission, and many non-Catholics and non-Christians and non-religious may do it in an exemplary way. So much really depends on the person and their willingness to support one or more aspects of the mission. The point then is fundamentally about being careful and selective in hiring and promotion, and keeping the mission front and center in these activities. Ex Corde and the U.S. application, again, tend to highlight the importance of faculty and faculty hires, insisting that they respect the institution's identity and commitment to teaching the faith. But again, this puts it negatively and leaves out the important role of staff and administrators as well, all of whom can positively contribute and give a lot, since the mission is so broad and multifaceted and there are so many avenues to contribute to it. Everyone can lend a hand, and often it's just a matter of pointing out and informing faculty, staff, and administrators some of the many ways that can happen. Let me turn now to another facet of the community life support system that's essential to fostering the Catholic and inclusive character of the university. This is the obvious one of campus ministry. While all employees in their different roles can contribute in some way to the unique community of Catholic higher education, the campus ministry staff have a very explicit and important role in doing this. And practically every church document from the 1970s onward refers to its importance. Campus ministry seeks to sustain a Christian community of faith on campus through opportunities for worship and prayer and theological study and service. They are one of the focal points for Catholic identity on campus in overseeing liturgies and the preparation and celebration of the sacraments. They are the visible face of the local church on campus, and for that reason they are ultimately overseen by the local bishop. According to Ex Corde Ecclesia, pastoral or campus ministry is a constitutive element of a Catholic university itself, both in its structure and in its life. A university community concerned with promoting the institution's Catholic character will be conscious of this pastoral dimension and sensitive to the ways in which it can have an influence on all university activities. And the Pope goes on to say that as a natural expression of the Catholic identity of the university community should give a practical demonstration of its faith in its daily activity, with important moments of reflection and of prayer. Catholic members of this community, therefore, will be offered opportunities to assimilate Catholic teaching and practice into their lives, and will be encouraged to participate in the celebration of the sacraments, especially the Eucharist. The Catholic University in the Modern World from 1972 notes that pastoral or campus ministry plays a key role in fostering the Christian atmosphere of the university community. Yet those engaged in campus ministry cannot neglect the students of other faiths, but ought to offer them any spiritual assistance they may need, at the same time respecting their freedom to maintain and express their own religious convictions. To this end, it may be appropriate to invite ministers of other churches to participate in the university's pastoral program. Students of other religious traditions, or of none at all, should find at a Catholic university a living witness to Christianity that will attract them to want to know it better. So the tradition that has evolved since Vatican II at Catholic universities with such diverse students and employees has been to try to meet the spiritual needs of each person, Catholic and non-Catholic, respecting the freedom of all, and respecting the initiatives for reflection and prayer of other Christian groups and religions. For the Catholic students in particular, though, campus ministry provides an opportunity and an indispensable means by which Catholic students can grow in their faith, and for them to be prepared for active participation in the life of the Church, whether through marriage and the family or various vocations and the wider service that laity carry out in the world. The hope is that campus ministry may help all students see that their entire college or university experience is an opportunity for the discovery of God's abiding presence and influence in their lives and in the world at large. Given all that the campus ministry staff is charged to do, and given how critical its function is for maintaining the wider culture and community of the institution, a repeated theme one sees is the necessity for the university to properly fund the campus ministry office. In 1981, the U.S. bishops write in their document, Catholic Higher Education and the Pastoral Mission of the Church, that though much progress lately has been made in improving the quality and extent of campus ministry on Catholic campuses, there still is vast room for upgrading this important element of Catholic higher education. To a large extent, we fear campus ministry still suffers badly from inadequate budgets and from too limited a staff. 20 years later, the U.S. application of Ex Corde notes that the university, in cooperation with the diocesan bishop, shall make provision for effective campus ministry programs, including the celebration of the sacraments, especially the Eucharist and penance and other liturgical celebrations, and opportunities for prayer and spiritual reflection. To go back to the first of the four characteristics of Catholic universities, Christian inspiration of individuals and of the community, it's difficult to maintain the Catholic character and Christian inspiration of the university without sacramental worship. That is something that Ex Corde Ecclesia emphasizes strongly. But with the shortage of priests in the United States only growing worse over the last several decades, this is increasingly difficult to maintain, especially in many smaller Catholic colleges and universities. And that threatens the campus ministry life support system of Catholic universities in another way. Now, to fill the breach, a number of innovations in Catholic higher education have been made, specifically with the aim of promoting the Catholic and inclusive and genuine community culture, supplementing the efforts of campus ministry. And these are the evolution of the student affairs profession at Catholic universities and the evolution of offices for mission. So to start with the evolution in student affairs, those working at Catholic colleges and universities took seriously the challenge of John Paul II in Ex Corde to foster the Catholic culture of the universities more intentionally. So a number of student affairs professionals began to meet in the late 90s at John Carroll University in Ohio, and they formed the Institute for Student Affairs at Catholic Colleges. By 1999, over 220 student affairs professionals had attended this institute. A core group of vice presidents of student affairs who had been instrumental in running the institute then formed in 1999 the Association for Student Affairs at Catholic Colleges and Universities. In the 25 years since the founding of this organization, one of the most important fruits of their labors has been the articulation of principles of good practice for student affairs at Catholic colleges and universities, which is currently in its third edition. And these principles represent some of the most important professional standards and goals of the student affairs profession in Catholic settings. I won't go over all of the principles now. There are 9 of them, but what I would like to do is simply read a number of them to illustrate how intentionally they are seeking to foster the kind of community Catholic universities aspire to be. So listen for the notes of clear Catholic identity and inclusion and embrace of all students and the core values I mentioned earlier. Principle number 1 is that student affairs professionals embrace all students as valued members of an inclusive and diverse community that embodies God's love for all. Principle number 2 assumes that student affairs professionals will be formed and educated with knowledge and perspectives so that they're able to contribute to the Catholic mission of the institution. Like campus ministers, Principle 3 states that they are to accompany students on their search for truth and meaning and personal accountability. Principle 4 emphasizes the importance of students learning to live solidarity with others and become those who are committed to supporting the dignity of all people and embracing the goals of diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice in a community of love. Principle 5 calls and challenges students to personal integrity, reverence, care for self, others, and the wider community. And Principle 6 invites and accompanies all students to develop an active and meaningful relationship with God. Now, student affairs per se gets hardly any mention in Catholic documents on higher education, but it's clear that they are now one of the most essential supports for the vision of campus community life that has been the hope since the breakdown of the old Catholic ghetto model of schools that existed prior to the 1960s. Finally, and occurring on a somewhat later trajectory, has been the development of the profession of the mission officer at Catholic colleges and universities. Beginning in the 1990s, this became a new way in which Catholic universities sought to foster and strengthen their Catholic identities, again in the wake of recognizing the losses to Catholic identity that had mounted through the 70s and 80s. And so the institution of mission officer positions took off in the early 2000s. Over time, it has really solidified to the point where in recent years, something like 80% of the 200 plus Catholic universities in the nation have a mission officer or officers. In 2023, the gathering of mission officers at the annual meeting of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities officially formed their own professional organization, mirroring what Catholic student affairs professionals had done 2 decades earlier. And while now is not the place to get into all the sorts of things that mission officers do, I note this development here simply to point out how crucial they have become to maintaining the Catholic culture and character of the colleges and universities. In innumerable ways, they have become catalysts for fostering the Catholic character and culture, especially in work among the faculty and staff and trustees. Given the nuances and complexities of the Catholic mission, which we are still unfolding here, and the complexities of higher education, their contribution has become seen as essential for the mission not getting lost amidst countervailing influences and continuous challenges that administrators and boards face, and just the sheer complexity of universities being the homes of numerous intellectual fields all being pursued in tandem. Mission officers help teach and clarify the mission by providing formation and education opportunities, especially for employees and board members. They seek to support the willingness that exists in many to understand the mission better and to carry it out more intentionally. In many cases, they oversee campus ministry and seek to support the efforts of student affairs professionals as well as faculty and other staff. They have many different roles, but the point is that they are integral in many Catholic colleges and universities today to the efforts to maintain a Catholic culture. So in sum, we can say that there is and has been a whole series of methods and mechanisms employed by Catholic universities over the last decades precisely to make and keep the culture true to the vision. So what that culture is one important part of that vision, and how to maintain it in the personnel and campus ministry, student affairs, and through other means is another. And there's more to come, and in the next audio we will look especially at the academic component of the mission, as well as service and relationship to the wider church. These are more strands in the braided cord of mission, more parts of the distinctive anatomy and physiology of Catholic higher education.